on iCatholic Radio on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Ask a Priest Live. Guided by the Holy Spirit and honoring the magisterial teachings of the Church. Faithful Catholic priests answering questions for believers and those seeking truth. Ask a Priest, because Father knows best. And now, your host, Jordan Pacheco.
God be praised in his angels and in his... Hello, everybody, listeners and viewers all. Welcome back to Ask a Priest Live. I'm your host, Jordan Pacheco, and we are so back. And that's all I will say on the matter. But I hope you all had a little bit of time to rest. I know I stayed up till 3 o'clock last night, kind of following the election results, like every nerd that there is. So now that that's all over, I can go back to caring about things more immediate on the ground, like freezing my tail off here in Colorado. It is cold outside, friends, which is why I'm wearing my Stranger Thing hat, much to, I'm sure, the great chagrin of our producers, Daniel and James. But yeah, I just don't care. But anyway, hey, welcome to Ask a Priest Live. For all of you who are new, who are joining us, we're very happy that you decided to tune in with us. This is a great show. If you have live questions, any question at all, big or small, there's usually a great place you can come to. We have wonderful Catholic priests, and you get to ask those questions. And today is a very special episode. We have a very special priest on with us today. It has been a while, Canon Michael Stein, Institute of Christ the King. It's been a while indeed that we've been on together, but I'm very happy that we are on together today. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Well, like you said, we are so back.
Yeah, yes, we are so back indeed. Well, I'm very happy that you're on with us today, and we have a very special episode. And so I want to just kind of set the stage. So today's episode, friends, you can see in the title, we're talking about Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest Oblates. And now listen, if you don't know what that is, we're going to get into it. But even just wider, one of the great things about this show that I've really appreciated is that we have priests, traditional orders. We have priests all over, also diocesan. We have religious, but also we have priests of the Institute of Christ the King, as well as the Fraternity of St. Peter. And as a result, we also get a lot of questions just in general about the Institute. And we have even seminarians or people who are considering what priestly vocation or maybe other vocation look like, oftentimes calling or emailing in, wanting to get some more information. So we thought it'd be really nice to actually give the Institute and give the Oblates in particular kind of a chance to tell us a little bit more about themselves. So all questions today are going to be for that goal, friends. That phone line's open, 1-877-511-5483. If you have a more general question, definitely save that for tomorrow. Don't worry, we will definitely get to it. But today, questions all about Institute of Christ the King Oblates, 1-877-511-5483, or email your questions for Canon at thestationofthecross.com. Okay, well, first question of first questions, Canon. What exactly is an oblate? Because that's a relatively new term even for me.
Oh, good. Well, to help with that, out with that, can offer some distinctions and maybe some analogies or use some terms that are already familiar to your everyday Catholic in the 21st century. One of the first things that might be a little more familiar to us, I'm sure many people know that in monasteries and in the lives of the monks, within a monastery, you have both fathers and brothers. Not everyone is a priest in the monastery. So just like in a monastery, you have fathers and brothers, and those are two distinct vocations within the monastic vocation. Well, so too in the Institute of Christ the King, you have both canons and oblates. So you have both the fathers within the Institute of Christ the King, ordained priests who are canons, and then you have the brothers within the Institute of Christ the King who are clerical oblates, worth a distinction as well. And that was going to be my second introductory distinction. Sometimes referring to orders, and even these days in the 21st century, oblate could be a loose term and even refer to lay oblates. So it could even refer to people still in the world. Whereas in the Institute of Christ the King, when we talk about oblates, we're talking about clerical oblates. These are young men that are giving their lives to the life of the church as an offering. And that then leads us to the very first aspect of what is an oblate. We can start with the etymology. It comes from the Latin oblatus, which is an offering, an oblation. So an oblate is one who is offered. So you see at the very heart of the vocation of a clerical oblate is offering themselves to the will of God and offering themselves as an active sacrifice for his glory and salvation of souls here on this earth. And that can be done in a non-priestly way and yet in a clerical way. We can belong to the hierarchy of the church. We can belong to the sacrament of orders as well without it including the priestly ordination. So I think that's a little bit of context to start off to kind of set the stage. We are talking about men that are clergy. We are talking about men in the hierarchy of the church that can receive orders, especially the minor orders, and it's a life of service. So that's a first beginning of explaining what an oblate is.
That's a very good beginning, because we do have this question here. Canon, what therefore is the role of an oblate within the Institute, and what are the requirements for somebody to become, in this particular case, the question says like a clerical oblate, but maybe it'd be nice to even have the distinctions of the different oblates therein.
Yeah, so every time we're referring to an oblate within the Institute of Christ the King, we're necessarily referring to a clerical oblate. Our oblates in the Institute are clergy. And before getting into the details of that question, it's worth showing too how God's loving providence has called the Institute of Christ the King to truly be a full spiritual family. In the Institute of Christ the King, we have fathers as the canons and the priests. We also have a sister branch. So we have sisters in our order, the adorers of the royal heart. And then still within the clergy, we have our brothers, the oblates. And we do have a lay society in the Institute of Christ the King, the Society of the Sacred Heart, where lay members and that are in the world can live the charism of the Institute in their own vocation, whether they be mothers or fathers or single people in the world. So yes, the Institute of Christ the King is a full spiritual family, and the oblates are the brothers in that full spiritual family. Oblates can also be very kindly referred to as the guardian angels of the priests, and that kind of shows first their roles too. They're great collaborators of the priests. They help form the community life of our everyday living. One of the charisms of the Institute of Christ the King is that very strong community life. We're never a loner out in our apostolate. We take our meals in common. We chant the divine office multiple times a day together publicly. We really have that monastic backbone to our daily life, and our oblates are an integral part of that community life. So they participate in the life of the liturgy of the apostolate and of the house. They participate in the life of community, the meals, the activities, and they are truly the right-hand men of the priests. And I'm blessed with an oblate as a confrere here in Kansas City. And sometimes I say only half jokingly that not only is he my right hand, he's my right hand, my left hand, my right foot, my left foot, everything we do for the parish, we do together, and he's a great collaborator. And if that's a little too general, I can begin to introduce a resource for everyone. I know no one goes on to radio to read a page. We can talk about it. But on the Institute of Christ the King website, one of our main tabs is vocations. And within the vocation tab is the clerical oblate vocation. And it does explain what an oblate does in their daily life and how they live our spirituality, how they give their lives as a total oblation to this service, this work of redemption, and to aid the priests. And there's practical examples of it, preparing the sacristy, serving the altar, playing the organ, chanting the liturgies. The spiritual life of the oblates is directed toward a spirit of service and charity. There's so much more we could say, but maybe individual questions will help flesh that out even more.
1-877-511-5483. We have a very special episode we're on today with Canon Michael Stein, Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest. We're talking about Institute Oblates today, and so it's going to be awesome. We're directing most of our live questions about that issue, but don't worry, if you have a general question, that's what tomorrow's episode is for. James out there in New Hampshire, I do see that you're on the line. Go on and stay there, James, because I only have about half a minute, I was going to say, until the music. So we're going to go ahead and get to your question right after the break. And also, the page about clerical oblates that Canon mentioned is in the description of this episode. So we're trying to be a little bit better about linking resources for people whenever they're mentioned. So if you're kind of interested or want to get even more information, that'll be a very, very good place. 1-877-511-5483, or you can email your questions for Canon today, priests@thestationofthecross.com, as well as type up your questions on YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. YouTube, I see your questions popping in. We're going to get through your questions as best as we can. In the meantime, have some other questions popping in concerning oblates, concerning things from training to responsibilities. I even see one about the kind of clerical garb that they might wear. So we're going to try to get through as many of these questions as they come in, friends. But if you want to get your question in for Canon Stein, the best way is to call in. That phone line's open, except for you, James. I haven't forgotten. 1-877-511-5483. You can call in even throughout the break. 1-877-511-5483. I'm Jordan Pacheco. Don't go anywhere. We still have plenty more Ask a Priest Live and plenty more Canon Michael Stein. And we'll be right back with your question, James, right after the break. God bless you.
Introducing iCatholic Mobile, the mobile phone service that keeps you connected while supporting your faith. Every time you make a call, send a text, or browse the web, you're helping the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network continue its mission. A portion of every iCatholic Mobile plan goes directly to supporting Catholic programming that spreads the truth, defends the unborn, and strengthens souls. Join the network that aligns with your values. More info at iCatholicMobile.com.
Download the app to take our programming with you wherever you go. Hear what listeners are saying about the regularly updated iCatholic Radio app.
The programs on iCatholic Radio are uplifting, educational, and have served to deepen my faith as a Catholic. Thank you for this amazing station.
Download the free iCatholic Radio app in your Android or Apple store today. If you already have the app, please consider giving us a 5-star review or telling a friend about it.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
You're listening to Ask a Priest Live from the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. Have a question? Ask a priest. Call 1-877-511-5483 or email us at priests@thestationofthecross.com.
God bless you, listeners and viewers all. Welcome back to Ask a Priest Live. I'm your host, Jordan Pacheco. We're joined today by Canon Michael Stein, Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest, out there in Kansas City, where I got plenty of family at, by the way. And we definitely want to get your questions in. We're having a very special episode all about Institute Oblates. So we had a very great segment explaining what an oblate is, in this case, the clerical oblates of the Institute of Christ the King. So if you have questions particularly about that, we definitely want to hear from you. 1-877-511-5483. James in Massachusetts, always good to hear from you. And what's your question for Canon?
Hello. Well, New Hampshire, but close enough. How are you? So my question is, is there a vow of poverty or a vow of chastity that one has to take, and what's the age limit?
Yes, thank you, James. So to introduce a good answer to that question, let's also put it within the context of the Institute of Christ the King. So canonically speaking, or technically speaking, we are not a religious order. We're a society of apostolic life, which means we don't make religious vows in the Institute of Christ the King. Of course, we live the spirit of poverty. Of course, we live obedience. And of course, chastity, the vow of chastity comes with our subdiaconate ordination. But for example, if I had a vow of poverty, this would not be my cassock. This would be cassock B1, and someone else would get it next year. So we are allowed to have personal possessions, all while living the spirit of poverty. So if that's the case for the Institute of Christ the King as a society of apostolic life, that is also the case for our clerical oblates who live by our side and live our charism. So no, there is no canonical vow of poverty. There's, of course, the spirit of poverty to live by, and our obedience. And then the vow of chastity would come if the oblate was called to be ordained a subdeacon, which does happen to a good case of our oblates. And even if they don't get called to that order, of course, they still live the chastity of their state. They still live their consecrated chastity as a clerical oblate, that complete gift of self. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit the level of vow, but still, of course, living those virtues. And then as far as age limit goes, I imagine you're asking, like, if there's an older age that tops out before you can ask to join. So again, the end goal here is to always do the will of God. And the older one is a little bit rarer that it is that God would call to such a state in life later in life, but we're open to the will of God. The superiors and the young man or the man inquiring, we should all be on the same page and want the same thing, which is the will of God to happen. So there could be visits and discernment period. It's just very rare that it happens much later in life when there's already life habits, and then you're being asked to change your charism, your everyday life. But of course, when it's the will of God, exceptions are made, and we do have oblates in the Institute of Christ the King that did in fact join at an older age, and that are thriving beautifully in their vocation. So I hope that helps answer your questions.
I think that also bleeds in really nicely to this next question. I think you answered it for the most part, Canon, but the question from Sylvester on YouTube is, what is the range of ages accepted? So we talked about the ceiling. Are there any kind of floor ages accepted as well?
Well, I think you can't go below the age of becoming a major. So you have to be an adult, 18, to join. And I myself am blessed to have joined the Institute of Christ the King at the age of 18, shortly after high school, and a couple semesters at Christendom College. So yes, of course, it's an adult decision and an adult regulations. But if it's the will of God, why would you put the will of God on hold or on pause? If you're called to join a community, if you are called, or if you even are clearly at the level of discernment, you're not going to discern a consecrated vocation in the in the world. The world's not the place to discern if you're called to leave the world. We're all in the world from the beginning. So yes.
1-877-511-5483. Going to get those questions in for Canon Stein today. 1-877-511-5483. We are talking about Institute of Christ the King Oblates today. Great questions here on the docket. I want to do this one from JD on YouTube. I see. He says, "Hi, Canon. Do you have any advice for discerning the priesthood?" And I want to add on top of that, Canon, that how would one discern if whether you should be kind of a full canon in the Institute versus an oblate?
Well, thank you for providing that question, because it's a distinction I wanted to make sure I made on this show. When we don't know what something is, we go about discovering it or learning it, like we did in the beginning of the show, through analogy or terms that are used to us. But we can also check off things what it's not, and that helps us arrive at a better understanding of what it is. What an oblate vocation is not, an oblate is not a failed priest or a failed seminarian. It's not like, oh, I tried to be a seminarian, I'll quote unquote settle for being an oblate when that didn't work out. That's a misconception that truly needs to be dispelled, not only from any false judgment on the outside of the faithful looking in, but of course for the young man discerning himself. An oblate vocation is a complete and distinct vocation from the priestly vocation, just like a monastic vocation is completely distinct from a diocesan vocation. It's one thing to be called to give your life to God and his church, and then it's a whole nother layer of discernment of how am I meant to give my life to God and the church. And so it's a very different vocation to be called to have the charge of souls, to absolve sins, and to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass, which is the vocation to the priesthood. And there's plenty of men that want to give their life to the church, that want to live for that greater supernatural common good, that want to be an offering, that don't have a priestly vocation. So of course there's a place for them. And of course throughout history, there's always been brothers and clerical oblates. I think it's worth mentioning that even our North American martyrs that we celebrate gloriously, we know Saint Isaac Jogues, Saint John de Brebeuf, but so many of them were oblates in the Jesuits, like Saint Rene Goupil and the others we celebrate. So there's a rich history of the church of these men that give their lives as an oblation for the glory of God and salvation of souls that don't have a priestly vocation. So I wanted to make sure that's clear. It's an oblate is not a glass half full of a priestly vocation. An oblate is just another glass, and it's completely full, just like the priestly vocation is another glass and completely full. And then for the particulars of discerning, any person discerning the will of God, the first prerequisite is to want the will of God and to have an open heart, no matter what the state in life be. And then once you have that open heart and that very necessary disposition of docility, then you can, do visits, spend time, and then receive the formation of this or that vocation, receive the knowledge of what it entails. And if that appeals to your heart, if there's peace in that discernment, if you feel at home, well, that's how God works. God plants seeds of attraction in our heart and soul so that we can be drawn to the very thing he created us for from all eternity, so that we can be truly happy and spend then all eternity with him in heaven. The only way we know peace and happiness in this valley of tears is if we're doing the will of God. And so placing yourself in a situation where you can discern the particulars of oblatehood, that will help, or discern the particulars of if you become a candidate to the priesthood or seminary. It's living that life in the time period of discernment that will help you. Is like, is this the life that's quote unquote home? Is this where's there interior peace that can't be farsed from the outside? So that's important. And maybe it's another question, but in the United States, we have a particular house of formation for candidates to our Institute Oblatehood, and that's our house in St. Louis. St. Francis de Sales Oratory in St. Louis is our house of formation for our oblates in the U.S. province, and also where all our candidates go that are discerning an oblate vocation.
1-877-511-5483. Going to get those questions in, friends. We're talking all about Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest Oblates today. Phone lines open at 1-877-511-5483. A couple of minutes before the music here, I see your call on the line, Brother Knight Scott. I'll get to that in just a moment, but let me see. Oh, here we go. This one is kind of a fun question, which is what, well, actually, can I answer that in a couple minutes? It's so hard when you're doing this live because I'm seeing some of these really great questions, but I'm trying to think of what it might do. Yeah, we might as well just ask this, and we can always pick this up on the other side of the break, Canon. But Brother Knight Scott in Rochester says, is there such a thing as women oblates or a similar equivalent? And if so, what would their role be? I know of oblate nuns at St. Joseph's, but I'm not sure if they're still around.
Yeah, so again, it gets to the very first question in the opening of the program, the distinction of what we mean by oblates, that the term can be general. When we're referring to the Institute of Christ the King, the oblates therein, they are clerical oblates. And so he who says clerical necessarily says male, because they're members of the clergy. So in the case of the Institute, yes, it's all male because they're clerical oblates. Now, if there's other orders that use oblate in a more generalized term, where there could be lay oblates, well, he who says lay oblate means it could be male or female.
Right in the nick of time too. Thanks, Canon. Great question indeed, Brother Knight Scott. And man, friends, we are already halfway through our show. There's a lot of questions coming through here on the docket. I even think I saw a call starting to trickle in. So here at the halfway mark, friends, if you have any questions concerning the Institute of Christ the King Oblates, that is what myself and Canon Stein are here for today. So go ahead and call in 1-877-511-5483. Again, that call-in number 1-877-511-5483, or you can email your questions, of course, priests@thestationofthecross.com, as well as type them up on YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. I'm Jordan Pacheco. Don't go anywhere. More Ask a Priest Live and more Canon Stein right after the break. God bless you.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
I'm a widower, parent of 3 almost adults, and listen to you guys around the clock. Father McTigg, Society of Jesus, he's wonderful. Mother Miriam, of course, the Divine Office, and many other great things that Station of the Cross does. So thanks very much for your great work.
I had a friend at work email me and tell me about the Station of the Cross a couple months after it started, and I was so excited. I tuned into it, and I found that I love the Catholic station.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112, then share your testimonial with us.
Think about this. Almost every day, you benefit from one or more of your guaranteed freedoms in the First Amendment. When you practice your religion, when you speak your mind, when you write a letter to the editor or post on social media, when you gather together peacefully with others for a cause, when you write to Congress or the government asking for change. These are 5 freedoms guaranteed to every American in the First Amendment. Think first. Go to thinkfirstamendment.org to learn more.
Catholic radio has just been a lifesaver for me. I still listen to it every day. I start my day with it. I listen to it all day long as much as I can. I am very grateful for it.
It's just an amazing thing to have, as I am new to Catholicism. Obviously, it's not only helping me, but it's helping so many other people on their walk.
Thank you. God bless you for iCatholic Radio. It has changed my life.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
Did you know that live video of the show is just a few clicks away? Follow us on Facebook and YouTube at Ask a Priest Live. Search for the Station of the Cross on Rumble. Or check out our Watch Live page at thestationofthecross.com.
God bless you, listeners and viewers all. Welcome back to Ask a Priest Live. I'm your host, Jordan Pacheco. Hey, we're joined today by Canon Michael Stein, Institute of Christ the King Sovereign Priest. We're having a very special episode all about Institute Oblates today. A lot of great questions concerning. If you're just tuning into the show, run back and you can hear what an oblate is and how they are separate, or clerical oblates we're talking about in the Institute, and how that differs from maybe the different ways we also use that term in the church at large. Before we get back to the questions, especially considering that we are so back today, some of you may be wanting to die, and most of you hopefully will be wanting to live. But no matter how you're feeling the day after the election, we want to make sure that not just our spiritual affairs are in order, but also our temporal affairs. And that's why I'm very happy that we've partnered with mycatholicwill.com. Mycatholicwill.com is offering a very, very special offer to all of our listeners and viewers. If you've been wanting to create your own Catholic will, now you can do so at absolutely zero cost. So go on over to mycatholicwill.com/the Station of the Cross and use our referral code 14 stations. That's 14 stations. To go on and get your own Catholic will created. Again, absolutely free. There's even an option to include the Station of the Cross in your will, should you want to make sure that this resource is available for generations to come. Again, that's mycatholicwill.com/the Station of the Cross. Use that promo code 14 stations and get that will created absolutely free. All right, back to the questions now. That phone line is wide open, 1-877-511-5483. Here comes a great question. It says, Canon, what kind of training and formation do oblates undergo?
Yeah, so during their years of formation, we want to make sure our oblates have at least a solid foundation, of course, of the catechesis, a good knowledge of catechism. It's one of the ways the oblates participate and help in our parish life, that they can teach catechism to our souls. It's always edifying when it's one of our clerical oblates that leads a children's catechism class or prepares a first communion class. Also, they're trained in all the ways of the breviary and the mass, so that they chant the office with us. Very often they lead the office as cantors, and in cases too, they help the practices and even help teach the other canons. When we have so many musically gifted oblates, they're the ones that keep us on our toes and keep us respecting the rules of Gregorian chant. And I'm very grateful for God giving such musical talent to our oblates that help us in the performance and prayer of the divine office. And of course, in the Mass, not only for their own serving of the sacred liturgy, but so they can transmit that as well to our altar boys here in Kansas City. It's a great joy to have Abbe Mark by my side in the formation of our altar boys. So they're formed in catechism, in Gregorian chant, in the liturgy, also history of the church, some introductory Latin, also whatever their interests or capacities allow for other languages like French, which is our diplomatic language within the Institute, so that there's no language barrier in our international community. And then another richness we see in the oblate vocation is so many of them bring practical skills with them too. We have oblates that are well-versed in computers, other oblates that are well-versed in mechanics. And according to the gifts of God, they either help us in the maintenance issues of the apostolate or the tech issues of the apostolate. It's really a wide variety. And that's part of the beauty of the vocation. God gives them so many different talents that are then offered for the good of the church, for the good of the apostolate, for the glory of God, for the salvation of souls. So the formation, I guess, to sum it up in a sentence, is those basics of the life of the church and the teaching of the church, and then developing already the God-given fruits and God-given talents that each of those individual oblates have. We're docile to those gifts that God has already given them.
This also kind of hits another question that we have here in the document. So the question was, how do oblates interact with the lay faithful in the broader community? I think you hit that pretty squarely, but it does beg the question, Canon. So obviously the Institute really does emphasize priests living in community together. And how does it work when an oblate is assigned to a parish? Do they otherwise live in kind of a separate community for a certain amount of years and then they go to parishes, or how does that work?
Yes. So St. Louis, St. Francis de Sales Oratory is our house of formation for the oblates in the U.S. province. But once they've had those initial years of formation, and normally after 2 years of initial formation, they're called to receive the cassock and the tonsure. And then they could either stay in St. Louis for supplementary years or continue their formation in an individual apostolate. And that's the case here in Kansas City. As of last fall, 2023, we are now blessed to have an oblate served by the side of the canons here to the faithful. And the faithful are enriched by the community life. Now if someone shows up early for confessions or mass, they're witnessing us chanting lauds before all that. Or if they pop in at midday, they're walking in on us chanting the midday office. Or when we do have evening mass or devotions, if they come early for that, they see us chanting vespers. And I think it's rather consoling to the community of faith that they pop in at church at almost any time of day and they quote unquote catch their clergy praying. They know that prayer is ongoing. They know that we're men of prayer and we're there in the shade of the tabernacle, praying for them, praying for souls. So there's that. And then there's also just the joy of community life when they see the beautiful interactions, the charitable and patient interactions between canons and oblates. And then that also gives the priest a little bit more authority from the pulpit. How dare I preach about charity and patience from the pulpit, and then I can't interact well with my oblate? I can't be edified by my oblate. I can't be corrected by a confrere entrusted to my care. And we're meant to have mutual emulation of virtue. We're meant to help each other, love God more and more each day. And so when the faithful get to witness that happy dynamic, I think it spurs them on too, to that life of charity and life of patience. And then I think that is a segue to the question of the visuals a little bit. Can someone tell the difference just visually between an oblate and a canon? And the answer to that is no, because as a member of the clergy, we're in cassock and we're in Roman collar. It's just like you can't tell externally if a seminarian's a priest or not once they're in cassock. But as you get to know them, you notice that the oblates, yes, maybe they can do the role of subdeacon, or maybe they can chant the epistle at Mass, but people observe, if they don't know them personally, they still observe. They never go to the confessional. They never distribute communion. They're never offering the Mass. So those are little external hints that they're either a seminarian or an oblate. Now, an oblate, when he's finished his formation and when he's discerned that the Institute is truly his home, an oblate in the Institute of Christ the King does get incardinated, meaning that they canonically join the Institute of Christ the King and are canonically a member of the Institute of Christ the King. So just like a canon of the Institute has the cross of St. Francis de Sales that he receives at his incardination when he's a deacon, and then it goes on top of his choir habit when he's a priest, well, so too an oblate that's incardinated also receives the Cross of St. Francis de Sales, and that goes on top of their surplus. So that's one way to know that an oblate, has finished their formation and time, and they truly belong canonically to the Institute when they wear the Cross of St. Francis de Sales.
1-877-511-5483. Go on and get your questions in for Canon Stein today. We're having a great show all about Institute of Christ the King Oblates. Great questions are trickling in. We want yours to be a part of them. 1-877-511-5483. Or you can email your questions, of course, priests@thestationofthecross.com, as well as type up your questions on YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. Oh, I like this question here. Canon, are oblates also called canon?
Very good. So they are not called canon because they are not ordained priests. So not every priest is a canon, but every canon is necessarily a priest. So that's one way to remember it easily. Now, unfortunately, in English, we now have a poverty of vocabulary that we don't know what to call clergy anymore. That's not deacon or a priest. We used to have the terms like Reverend Mr. That would be common language, but now Reverend Mr. is simply something that's only put on a letterhead envelope, or the Protestants have kind of usurped it. So when talking with members of the Institute, or if you read our publications, you'll often see the title Abbe used. So A-B-B-E with an accent going up, Abbe. And that's, kind of an Americanization of the longer French term Monsieur l'Abbé, which does mean Reverend Mr., so that we keep a term for clergy. This man is in cassock. This man has given his life to the church. He's not a priest, but we're not going to call him Joe Schmo either. So Abbe keeps a title that clearly designates that he's clergy, that he belongs to the church. And a little nuance that helps our faithful too. Abbe and last name is how you know they're a seminarian on the way to the priesthood. And Abbe and first name is how you know they're an oblate. So Abbe Mark is with us here in Kansas City, in St. Louis. You have Abbe Alex, Abbe Nicholas, just to name a couple. There's so many more. So when you hear Abbe and first name, then you know they're oblates, that you know they're brothers.
I like how since the oblates and the canons all dress the same, it's almost like as laity we have an obligation then to get to know who's staffing our churches. Otherwise, we're just going to call everybody canon, and it's going to throw the whole world into chaos, right?
But it also shows the beautiful standard of any man that is called to be a member of the clergy has a standard of visibly representing the church to the world. Whether you're a seminarian, oblate, or a priest, your very garb tells the whole world that you belong to the Catholic Church's hierarchy and you represent the Catholic Church visibly to the world. In military uniforms, the uniforms are the same regardless of the rank. It's just little symbols up by their chest that give cues to the rank. But the uniform, the military, is the same. And so same in the church. Our cassock is the same. Our collar is the same. And it's a beautiful standard. And our oblates embrace that so well. They know that they are visibly representing Holy Mother Church.
1-877-511-5483. If you have questions for Canon Stein today, we are talking about Institute of Christ the King Oblates. If you want to get your questions in, there's still some great ones here on the docket, and we are heading into our last segment of the day. So again, that call-in number is wide open. No questions too big, no questions too small. If you do have a general question, we will wait till tomorrow to get back to those, though. 1-877 511-5483. I want to thank our friends over at ICatholicMobile.com. Maybe it's time for you to consider ditching your big box phone company and going with something more aligned with your values. That's why iCatholic Mobile is here. They are the only American Catholic mobile phone company. Go on over to ICatholicMobile.com to get more information and sign up. A lot of great and competitive plans, both for individuals and for families. And iCatholic Mobile does give a portion of every dollar earned to the Station of the Cross. We're very, very grateful for that. Again, that's iCatholicMobile.com. Well, with one more segment, we have a great question. Macy off of Facebook, I see your question. Gonna take another scrub through YouTube. Actually, Canon, I'd love to read out some of these because there are certainly a lot of people in the chat who know you and miss you, especially out from Detroit, it looks like. So that's always nice to see. And then we'll get back through as many of these questions here in our last segment. This is Ask a Priest Live. Don't go anywhere. We have one more segment with Canon Stein, and we'll be right back right after the break. God bless you.
With praise, let us awake the dawn.
Start your day off right with prayer and reflection.
Have mercy on me, God, have mercy.
Join the Station of the Cross each weekday morning at 5 a.m. for the Office of Readings, Lauds, and the Holy Rosary. That's weekday mornings at 5 a.m. Eastern.
I call to God the Most High, to God who has always been my help.
Catholic radio has just been a lifesaver for me. I still listen to it every day. I start my day with it. I listen to it all day long as much as I can. I am very grateful for it.
It's just an amazing thing to have, as I am new to Catholicism. Obviously, it's not only helping me, but it's helping so many other people on their walk.
Thank you. God bless you for iCatholic Radio. It has changed my life.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
Did you know that an unwanted car or truck can make a great gift? When the time comes to purchase a new one, consider donating your old car or truck to the Station of the Cross. We have a quick and simple way for you to get rid of your unwanted vehicle while supporting the solid Catholic programming you love listening to on your radio, online, and through your mobile devices. Whether they run or not, we accept cars, trucks, RVs, boats, and motorcycles. It's a great opportunity for you to give more than you might normally be able to. At the same time, you'll be clearing out space in your garage or driveway, ridding yourself of an unwanted vehicle. Just visit us online at thestationofthecross.com or call 1-866-628-CARS, 1-866-628-2277. May God bless you for your generosity in support of Catholic Radio.
Enjoying the show? Catch up on podcasts of past episodes on your favorite platform. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, TuneIn, and the free iCatholic Radio mobile app.
God bless you, listeners and viewers all. Welcome back to Ask a Priest Live. I'm your host, Jordan Pacheco. Hey, we're joined today by Canon Michael Stein, Institute of Christ the King, Sovereign Priest, for a very special episode. We've been talking about Institute of Christ the King Oblates. I go to the Fraternity of St. Peter, and I don't think they have those, but fraternity, maybe step up your game there. That would be totally cool. No, just kidding. I'm totally just playing. But a very great show indeed. Hey, we have a few more questions rolling in. We definitely want to get through as many of them as possible. All right, let's go ahead and start with this one here. Actually, I want to take a spin off of YouTube. Living for Him, thank you for the super chat. That's great. And for those of you, whenever super chat comes in out of our typical kind of donation drive season, don't worry, that money is used to keep spreading the news of this show and the news of the station with clarity and charity. We are very much appreciative of that. And I love what you said there. Donation to this awesome show. We love Canon Stein. The Thors say hi, Canon. So you have some people who know you in the chat. The Thors, it looks like. You also have Danielle says, hi, Canon Stein from your old stomping grounds in Detroit. So there are people who very much appreciate you, Canon. It's always good to see.
God bless them. They're always kept in my prayers at the altar too.
That's wonderful, wonderful. All right, these questions are trickling in. We're going to get through as many of them here in our last segment of the day. Question here says, how do oblates balance their spiritual life with their physical duties?
That's a great question for two reasons. The first reason is because everyone needs to balance their spiritual life and physical duties. And that the priority is God first served, and everything else we do externally needs to flow from that union with God, and needs to be as if it's coming from the altar and going back to the altar. The oblates are men of the altar, men of prayer, just like the canons are. And so that spiritual life is a priority. And then the activities flow from there. Now, it's a great question for a second reason, too, because it helps bring one of the nuances of the oblate vocation compared to the priest to the forefront. Because there are certain things that only a priest can do. For example, the sick calls that require extreme unction or apostolic blessing, the offering of Mass and the absolution of sins. Well, then sometimes the oblates are able to take a larger share of some of the practical duties or manual duties or even administrative duties to allow the priest to be 100% a priest in the things that he can't delegate. The priest can't delegate the offering of the Mass. He can't delegate the absolution of sins. He can't delegate a sick call that requires extreme unction or apostolic blessing. So the oblates, this part of their oblation and their gift, that they really help the priest be a priest, and they help keep community life going. They help keep the liturgical life going. They keep making sure God is first served. They keep making sure the house is running well, etc. All with that supernatural vision of it's the glory of God and the salvation of souls that are at stake. So yes, spiritual life first, and then their physical and manual activities and labor are to help the priest and to help the glory of God and salvation of souls. And the balance is there like anyone else too. Oblates have some time to visit family like we would have as well. They have the freedom for physical activities as well, or recreation, their hobbies. For example, here, our oblate loves to ride his bike when the weather permits, or, some still play sports, whether it's baseball or ice hockey, just to name a couple. So all that helps keep balance so that we can better serve. It's all in view of better serving.
Second question here pops up. Canon, how do oblates contribute to the life, mission, and apply themselves to the Institute's charism?
I think a lot of that question has hopefully been answered throughout the whole interview, but to kind of say things precisely, we're all consecrated to Our Lady under the title of the Immaculate Conception. The oblates make that daily consecration with us before lauds every morning because we belong to the same spiritual family. They share the same patrons we have, St. Francis de Sales, St. Benedict, St. Thomas Aquinas. So they live the charism just like a canon does through Salesian spirituality after St. Francis de Sales, with particular studies under the guidance of St. Thomas Aquinas, with learning the lessons of St. Benedict from his rule, the priority of the liturgy, the importance of community life, the common good, hospitality, all those things that we receive from each of our patrons. The oblates help live that as well. And they contribute to the mission. Sorry, and they contribute to the mission. And they contribute to the mission also in that external way too, with helping with catechism, etc. events. Different apostolates have different activities. We have scouts here. Abbe Mark helps with the scouts, and so yes, they are by our sides. It's canons and oblates working together for all that is good for the apostolate.
Happy we're getting to this question here as we kind of approach our last couple of minutes here. But Macy on Facebook, great question here, and kind of from the last question even. But how long, Canon, does each oblate stay at each apostolate, and how many oblates are there per apostolate?
Yeah, so generally An oblate, thanks be to God, can be a source of continuity and stability in our apostolates. So remember, the Institute of Christ the King is still a young and growing order, and we're invited into dioceses at a regular basis, and we can't become too little butter spread over too much bread. So we need to keep our community life. The oblates help us do that. They're growing in numbers too to support the individual apostolates. But when we do open new apostolates, it's not the newly ordained priest from just a couple months ago that you're going to send to be the pastor. So there's always a shift in the veterans, as there were. Some of the experienced priests would then be asked to help found the new apostolate. And when there is some of that shift in the priestly assignments, very often the oblates are the ones that are able to remain at that apostolate and just be a great source of continuity for the faithful, be a great source of stability. You know, already the Institute rejoices in wonderful stability in all the assignments because we all come from the same mother house. We all receive the same formation. We all have the same priorities. We all have the same patrons. And so there's already a source of stability through our charism. But then one could say the oblates kind of incarnate that stability. They are physically still there after a priest change. So yes, oblates do tend to stay in the apostolates even longer than a stable priestly presence.
About a minute before the music, canon, we'll try to slide this one in, but for someone who's interested in being part of the oblates, how and where do they apply?
Yeah, so if you're in the U.S. province, you can go directly to our website, institute-christ-king.org. You can click on the tab in the title, Vocations, and under that tab, Clerical Oblates is there. That's for information. You contact our vocations director. There's an email address listed on the website as well, or even contact St. Louis, and they can help you with other details, because St. Louis, St. Francis de Sales Oratory, is our house of formation for oblates, and you would be recommended to make an initial visit there for your inquiry.
Canon, will you please leave us with your blessing?
Per intercessione Sancte Francisci Salesii, benedictio de omnipotentis Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. God bless you all, and thank you for a wonderful episode. I'm happy to be back on the show, and maybe we can get you a winter hat there that's all black and has a blue pom-pom.
Yeah, that's right. I'm waiting, Institute. More merch is great. Hey, I'm Jordan Pacheco. This is Ask a Priest Live, and I will see all of you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. God bless you. Stay warm.
Calling all pro-life people of goodwill. The next National Men's March to abolish abortion and rally for personhood is taking place in Boston, Massachusetts.